In March 2024, digital forensics expert Rachel Monroe was working late in her home office in Phoenix, Arizona. She was going through the recovered data from her sister Natalie's smartphone, a device that had been found damaged at the bottom of Grand Canyon 5 years earlier. Rachel had requested the phone from evidence storage after the case was officially closed. The local police had ruled Natalie Brooks and her boyfriend Brandon Ellis's disappearance a tragic hiking accident. Case closed. Family closure achieved. But Rachel Monroe wasn't satisfied. As a digital forensics specialist for the FBI, Rachel knew that damaged devices often held secrets that initial investigations missed. She had enhanced hundreds of seemingly corrupted files, recovered deleted messages that solved cases, and found digital breadcrumbs that led to justice. Natalie's phone would be no different. At 11:47 p.m. on March 15th, Rachel successfully recovered a photo that would change everything. It was Natalie and Brandon's final selfie, taken at Hopi Point at 3:47 p.m. on the day they vanished. But when Rachel enhanced the image and adjusted the contrast, she saw something that made her blood run cold. They weren't alone. Standing approximately 30 feet behind the couple, partially obscured by shadow and rock formation, was the silhouette of a man. He wasn't posing for a tourist photo or admiring the canyon vista. His body language was different, deliberate, watching. The figure appeared to be wearing dark clothing and a wide-brimmed hat. His position wasn't random. He was positioned with a clear line of sight to Brandon and Natalie, yet concealed from their view by the natural rock formations. Rachel's hands trembled as she adjusted the image parameters further. The timestamp confirmed this was taken at 3:47 p.m. on September 14, 2019. According to the official investigation, this was approximately 20 minutes before Brandon and Natalie were last seen alive. But here's what made Rachel's expertise invaluable. She noticed something the original investigators had missed. The metadata showed this wasn't just any photograph. The camera settings had been automatically adjusted for optimal lighting conditions, which meant the phone's AI had detected multiple subjects in the frame. The phone knew there was a third person present. Rachel immediately called Detective James Harrison, the lead investigator on her sister's case. Harrison had been haunted by the investigation's inconclusive ending. Too many questions. Too few answers. Detective Harrison, this is Rachel Monroe. I need you to see something. Tonight? When Harrison arrived at Rachel's home office at 1:30 a.m., he stared at the enhanced photograph for several minutes without speaking. Finally, he looked up at Rachel with an expression she recognized from her own work, the moment when a cold case suddenly becomes hot again. This changes everything, Harrison said quietly. But Rachel, you need to understand what this means. If there was someone else there, if someone was watching your sister and Brandon, then their deaths weren't an accident, Rachel finished. Harrison nodded grimly. And if this person was responsible for what happened to them, there's something else we need to consider. Something that's going to make this investigation much bigger than just one missing couple. What do you mean? Harrison pulled out his phone and showed Rachel a folder labeled Grand Canyon, Unsolved Disappearances 2008 to 2024. The folder contained 16 files. Your sister and Brandon weren't the first young couple to vanish from the Grand Canyon under mysterious circumstances. They were just the most recent. Rachel felt the room spinning. 16 cases. 16 unsolved disappearances spanning over 15 years. Are you telling me there's been a serial killer operating at Grand Canyon for over a decade? I'm telling you that tomorrow morning we're reopening not just your sister's case, but every single unexplained disappearance from the past 16 years. And Rachel, I'm going to need your expertise to examine every piece of digital evidence we have. As Harrison prepared to leave, he turned back to Rachel with one final observation that would haunt her for months to come. The position of that figure in your sister's photograph. He's not just watching them randomly. Look at his stance, his positioning relative to the trail markers. He knows exactly where they're going to walk. This wasn't opportunistic. This was planned. The next morning, Rachel took a leave of absence from her regular FBI duties. She had a new mission, finding the man who had been hunting couples at America's most visited national park for over 15 years. But what Rachel didn't know yet was that the figure in her sister's photograph had left similar signatures in other cases. Digital breadcrumbs that would reveal not just his identity, but his twisted methodology for selecting victims, stalking them for days before making his move, and staging their deaths to look like tragic accidents. The Canyon Watcher, as he would later be known, had been perfecting his technique for years. But his obsession with documenting his hunts would ultimately become his downfall. Brandon Ellis was 28 years old when he died, but his life was just beginning to take shape in all the ways that mattered. A software engineer for a renewable energy startup in Denver, Brandon had spent the previous year designing algorithms that would optimize solar panel efficiency across different geographic regions. His colleagues described him as brilliant but humble, the kind of person who would stay late to help a coworker debug code, then deflect credit when the project succeeded. Natalie Brooks, 26, had built a modest but growing travel blog called Wandering Brooks that focused on sustainable tourism and hidden gems in America's national parks. She had 35,000 followers who loved her authentic approach to travel. No staged Instagram photos or luxury hotel partnerships, just genuine exploration and environmental consciousness. Brandon and Natalie had met 18 months earlier at a climate change symposium in Boulder. Their first conversation lasted 4 hours, covering everything from renewable technology to responsible travel practices. By the time the conference ended, they both knew they had found something special. Their relationship was built on shared values and complementary skills. Brandon's technical precision balanced Natalie's creative spontaneity. Her environmental passion inspired his work on sustainable technology. They were planning a future that included both marriage and collaborative projects to promote eco-conscious living. The Grand Canyon trip was meant to be their first major adventure together, combining Natalie's travel expertise with Brandon's meticulous planning abilities. Brandon had spent 3 weeks researching the optimal hiking routes, weather patterns, and photography locations. He created detailed itineraries with backup plans for various scenarios. He even programmed a custom app on their phones that would work offline, providing GPS coordinates and emergency contact information. Natalie handled the storytelling aspect, planning blog posts and social media content that would showcase the canyon's majesty while educating her followers about leave-no-trace principles and park conservation efforts. They arrived at Grand Canyon National Park on September 12, 2019, planning a 4-day visit that would include both popular viewpoints and lesser-known hiking trails. Their first 2 days followed the plan perfectly. Social media posts showed them at Mather Point, Desert View, and Hermit's Rest. Natalie's photographs captured both the sweeping vistas and intimate details, wildflowers growing in rock crevices, the play of light and shadow on canyon walls, Brandon's smile as he pointed out geological formations. But someone else was documenting their trip as well. What investigators would later discover through enhanced security footage was that the same figure appeared in the background of multiple tourist photos taken over those first 2 days. Not obviously, he was skilled at staying on the periphery, blending with other visitors, maintaining distance. But he was there, watching, learning their patterns. On September 13th, their 3rd day, Brandon and Natalie decided to explore some of the less crowded areas Natalie had researched. They started early, hiking sections of the Rim Trail that most tourists skipped in favor of the more accessible viewpoints. Natalie's final blog post, uploaded at 2:15 p.m. on September 14th, read, "Day 4 at Grand Canyon, and we're discovering that the most beautiful moments happen when you step away from the crowds." Brandon found this incredible rock formation that perfectly frames the canyon layers. The geology here tells a story spanning millions of years. Sometimes you have to get a little lost to find the most amazing discoveries. The post included 3 photographs, Brandon pointing to rock layers, a close-up of the geological strata, and a wide shot of an area called Hopi Point that wasn't part of the main tourist circuit. At 3:47 p.m., Brandon used Natalie's phone to take what they thought would be a simple couple's selfie at that same location. They were both smiling, genuinely happy, with the vast canyon spread out behind them. Neither of them noticed the figure positioned 30 feet away, partially concealed by the natural rock formations. Park rangers would later determine that Brandon and Natalie were last seen alive at approximately 4:15 p.m. by another hiker who remembered them because they were helping an elderly tourist with directions back to the main trail. They seemed like such a nice young couple, the witness, Margaret Chen, told investigators. Very polite, very knowledgeable about the area. The young woman was explaining the different rock layers to the older gentleman, and the young man was showing him something on his phone, probably a map or GPS. By 6:30 p.m., when Brandon and Natalie failed to return to their hotel, the front desk began calling their room. By 8 p.m., when they missed their dinner reservation, hotel management contacted park rangers. The search began at dawn on September 15th. What searchers found was disturbing in its incompleteness. Natalie's phone was discovered damaged at the bottom of a ravine, approximately 200 feet below Hopi Point. Brandon's wallet was found nearby, but his phone was never recovered. There were no bodies, no blood evidence, no clear signs of struggle. The working theory became that they had gotten too close to the edge while taking photographs, possibly attempting to get a better angle for Natalie's blog. A tragic accident that happened too often at national parks when visitors prioritized the perfect shot over personal safety. But the canyon watcher knew better. He knew exactly what had happened, because he had orchestrated every moment of it, and he had been perfecting this technique for years. The search for Brandon Ellis and Natalie Brooks became one of the most extensive rescue operations in Grand Canyon National Park history. Within 24 hours of their disappearance, over 60 personnel were involved, including park rangers, search and rescue teams, helicopter crews, and specialized cliff rescue units. Search and rescue coordinator Maria Santos had overseen hundreds of operations during her 15-year career at Grand Canyon, but something about this case felt different from the beginning. Most missing persons cases at the canyon fall into predictable categories, Santos explained to the media during the 3rd day of searching. Medical emergencies, getting lost on trails, or unfortunately, accidental falls. But Brandon and Natalie were experienced hikers. They had proper equipment, and they were familiar with park safety protocols. The search pattern expanded systematically. Teams rappelled into ravines, drones surveyed inaccessible ledges, and helicopters used thermal imaging to detect any signs of life in the vast canyon system. On September 18th, 4 days after the disappearance, searchers made their first significant discovery. Natalie's damaged phone was found wedged between rocks approximately 200 feet below Hopi Point, the location where their final selfie had been taken. The phone's screen was shattered, but the device was largely intact. Park rangers immediately secured it as evidence and contacted the FBI's Digital Forensics Unit. 6 hours later, Brandon's wallet was discovered 30 feet from the phone's location. It contained his driver's license, credit cards, and $87 in cash. Robbery was clearly not a motive, but there were no bodies, no additional personal belongings, no blood evidence on the rocks above. Detective James Harrison, brought in from the Coconino County Sheriff's Office due to his experience with complex missing persons cases, found the evidence pattern troubling. In cases of accidental falls, we typically find more personal items scattered along the fall trajectory, Harrison explained to the family. Backpacks, water bottles, cameras, things that would separate from the body during a fall of this distance. The family refused to accept the emerging accident theory. Natalie's parents, David and Susan Brooks, drove from their home in Portland and established a command center at a local hotel. They organized volunteer search parties, created social media campaigns, and offered a $25,000 reward for information. Brandon's father, Robert Ellis, used his connections as a retired Denver police officer to pressure investigators for more thorough forensic analysis. "My son was a careful person," he told reporters. "He programmed safety apps, carried backup batteries, always shared his location with family. This doesn't fit his character." Media coverage intensified during the second week. Natalie's travel blog gained over 100,000 new followers as people shared her posts and photos from the Grand Canyon trip. The hashtag #Find Brandon and Natalie began trending on social media. But as days turned into weeks, the massive search operation began scaling back. Without additional evidence or credible sightings, resources were gradually redirected to other emergencies. The official investigation focused on reconstructing the couple's final hours. Security footage from park entrance stations, visitor centers, and parking areas was carefully reviewed. The timeline showed Brandon and Natalie following their planned itinerary until approximately 3 p.m. on September 14th. After that point, the trail went cold. Investigators interviewed other visitors who had been at Hopi Point that afternoon. Several people remembered seeing a young couple matching their description, but no one recalled anything unusual or threatening. The investigation hit a crucial obstacle when Brandon's phone could not be located. Unlike Natalie's device, which had fallen into the ravine, Brandon's phone seemed to have vanished completely. Detective Harrison found this particularly suspicious. In accidental fall scenarios, personal items typically stay together or follow similar trajectories. The fact that one phone was recovered while the other disappeared entirely suggests the possibility of third-party involvement. However, without physical evidence of foul play, the investigation gradually shifted toward the accident theory. 3 months after the disappearance, Coconino County officially classified the case as a probable accidental death. The family was devastated, but had exhausted their resources and options. In his final report, Detective Harrison wrote, "While the evidence is circumstantial, the most likely scenario is that Brandon Ellis and Natalie Brooks experienced an accidental fall while taking photographs at Hopi Point." The difficult terrain and rapid weather changes common to the Grand Canyon area may have contributed to their deaths. Without the recovery of physical remains, this case will remain open but inactive, pending new evidence. The case file was stored in the Sheriff's Department archive, joining dozens of other unsolved disappearances from America's national parks. But Detective Harrison never forgot the nagging inconsistencies, the missing phone, the lack of personal belongings, the pristine condition of the items that were recovered. Most troubling was something he never included in his official reports. During the investigation, he had received an anonymous tip claiming that a suspicious individual had been photographing visitors at various canyon locations during the week of Brandon and Natalie's disappearance. Harrison had investigated the tip, but found no corroborating evidence. The caller refused to provide contact information or appear for an interview. For 5 years, Harrison wondered if he had missed something crucial, something that could have saved other lives. He was about to find out. Rachel Monroe's discovery of the mysterious figure in her sister's final photograph triggered the most sophisticated digital forensics investigation in Grand Canyon's history. But extracting usable evidence from a 5-year-old damaged phone would require techniques that barely existed when the original investigation was conducted. Working from her home office, Rachel began by creating multiple backup copies of the recovered data. The phone's memory chip had suffered water damage and impact trauma, but modern recovery techniques could extract information that previous technology couldn't access. The first breakthrough came when Rachel used spectral imaging analysis, a technique developed for NASA satellite photography, to separate different light wavelengths in the photograph. This revealed details that were invisible to standard image enhancement. Under spectral analysis, the mysterious figure became much clearer. Rachel could now see that he was wearing dark hiking clothes, a wide-brimmed hat, and appeared to be carrying a professional camera with a telephoto lens. But the most chilling detail was his posture. The figure wasn't casually observing the scenery or waiting for friends. His body was angled directly toward Brandon and Natalie, and his hands were positioned as if he were operating camera equipment. He had been photographing them. Rachel spent the next 48 hours applying advanced forensic techniques to extract every possible detail from the image. She used machine learning algorithms trained on facial recognition databases, analyzed clothing patterns, and even examined the shadow angles to determine the precise time and positioning. The results painted a disturbing picture of calculated stalking. Based on shadow analysis, the photograph was taken at exactly 3:47 p.m., consistent with the phone's timestamp. But the figure's position revealed something more sinister. He had positioned himself at a location that provided optimal surveillance while remaining hidden from the couple's view. This wasn't random. This was professional. Rachel called Detective Harrison with her preliminary findings, but she knew they needed more evidence to reopen the case officially. That's when she decided to examine other digital evidence from the investigation archives. Working with Harrison's authorization, Rachel requested access to all digital devices and storage media recovered during the original search. This included damaged memory cards from other visitors' cameras found in the area, security system recordings from park facilities, and even satellite imagery from the day of the disappearance. The second breakthrough came from an unexpected source: a damaged SD card found near the search area that had never been successfully analyzed. The card belonged to an amateur photographer named Gary Chen, who had been visiting the canyon with his family. Chen's camera had been damaged during the initial search operations, and the memory card was assumed to be corrupted beyond recovery. Using 2024's advanced data recovery techniques, Rachel successfully extracted over 300 photographs from Chen's memory card. Most showed typical tourist photos of canyon views and family moments, but photograph number 247 changed everything. Taken at 11:23 a.m. on September 14th, approximately 4.5 hours before Brandon and Natalie's final selfie, the image showed a different area of the canyon. In the background, barely visible among the rock formations, was the same figure Rachel had identified in her sister's photograph. Same dark clothing, same wide-brimmed hat, same professional camera equipment. But this earlier photograph revealed something crucial. The figure had been tracking Brandon and Natalie for hours, moving to different vantage points, maintaining surveillance while remaining undetected. Rachel's hands shook as she enhanced the image further. The figure's face was partially visible beneath the hat brim, showing enough detail for potential facial recognition analysis. She immediately uploaded the image to the FBI's facial recognition database, cross-referencing with known offenders, park employees, and registered canyon guides. The system returned 43 potential matches, but one stood out immediately: Marcus Timothy Vaughn, a 42-year-old professional photographer with a history of disturbing behavior at national parks. Vaughn had been investigated twice for inappropriate photography of park visitors, but charges were never filed due to insufficient evidence. His registered address was in Flagstaff, Arizona, less than 2 hours from Grand Canyon. More disturbing were the details of his background. Vaughn had been employed as a freelance photographer for various outdoor magazines and had legitimate reasons to be at Grand Canyon regularly for commercial shoots. He had access, opportunity, and a documented pattern of problematic behavior. But Rachel's investigation revealed something even more sinister. Using advanced database searches, she discovered that Marcus Vaughn had been present at Grand Canyon during the time periods of at least 8 other unexplained disappearances over the past 12 years. The pattern was consistent: young couples, hiking in less crowded areas, during times when Vaughn had documented commercial photography assignments in the region. Rachel compiled her findings into a comprehensive digital forensics report that she presented to Detective Harrison on March 22, 2024. The evidence was circumstantial, but compelling enough to warrant reopening not just her sister's case, but potentially dozens of others. Harrison studied the enhanced photographs for hours before making his decision. Rachel, what you've uncovered here goes far beyond your sister's disappearance. If Marcus Vaughn has been operating as a serial predator for over a decade, we need to move fast. He's still out there. The next day, Harrison contacted the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit and requested a full investigation into what would become known as the Canyon Watcher case. But neither Rachel nor Harrison knew that Marcus Vaughn was already aware of their investigation. He had been monitoring law enforcement communications through illegally obtained scanner equipment, and he knew his time was running out. The hunter was about to become the hunted. The FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit assigned Special Agent Sarah Chen to lead the Canyon Watcher investigation. Chen specialized in serial predators, operating in remote locations, and she immediately recognized the sophisticated planning evident in Marcus Vaughn's methodology. This isn't an opportunistic killer, Chen explained to the joint task force assembled in Phoenix. The evidence suggests years of careful preparation, victim selection, and scene staging. We're dealing with someone who has turned murder into an art form. The task force began systematically reviewing every unexplained disappearance at Grand Canyon, dating back to 2008. Using Rachel Monroe's digital forensics techniques, they re-examined thousands of photographs, security recordings, and witness statements that had been overlooked during original investigations. The pattern that emerged was terrifying in its consistency. Marcus Vaughn targeted couples exclusively, focusing on pairs who met specific criteria: attractive young adults between ages 22 to 35, visiting the canyon without large groups, and showing signs of relationship happiness that he found triggering. Agent Chen's psychological profile revealed a disturbing motivation. Vaughn appears to be driven by resentment toward couples displaying public affection. His own romantic history shows multiple failed relationships and documented instances of stalking behavior toward ex-partners. The investigation uncovered 16 cases spanning 15 years where couples had disappeared under circumstances nearly identical to Brandon and Natalie's experience. 2009, Jessica Martinez, 24, and David Kim, 26. Last seen at Desert View, personal items found damaged at bottom of ravine, bodies never recovered. 2012, Lisa Chen, 25, and Robert Taylor, 27, honeymoon couple, disappeared during private hiking excursion. Only Lisa's wedding ring ever recovered. The list continued chronologically, each case showing Vaughn's evolving methodology and increasing sophistication. What made the investigation particularly challenging was Vaughn's legitimate presence at the canyon. As a freelance photographer with commercial clients, he had documented reasons to be present during each disappearance. His work permits and assignment records provided perfect alibis for his presence. But Agent Chen's team discovered something crucial. Vaughn's commercial photography assignments were often extended far beyond their scheduled completion dates. He would arrive days early and remain days after, using his professional credentials to access restricted areas and establish surveillance positions. The breakthrough came when investigators analyzed cell phone tower data from the past 5 years. Modern digital forensics could retroactively track device movements and identify patterns that weren't visible during original investigations. The data revealed that during each disappearance, an unknown device had been present in the vicinity, before, during, and after the incidents. The device used sophisticated anonymization techniques, but its movement patterns were consistent with someone conducting surveillance operations. More disturbing was the discovery that this same device had been actively scanning for other devices in the area, behavior consistent with someone identifying potential victims through their digital signatures. Vaughn had been using technology to hunt. Rachel Monroe's analysis of the technical evidence revealed the full scope of his methodology. He would arrive at the canyon days before his official photography assignments and identify couples through social media geotagging and park visitor patterns. Then he would track their devices, learn their hiking preferences, and position himself for optimal surveillance. Once he selected victims, he would follow them for days, documenting their routines and identifying opportunities. The attacks typically occurred during their final day at the canyon, when they were most relaxed and least cautious. The evidence suggested Vaughn's method for disposing of bodies was sophisticated and well-practiced. Rather than simply pushing victims off cliffs, he appeared to use specialized knowledge of canyon geology to access areas where remains would never be recovered. His background investigation revealed training in rock climbing, cave exploration, and desert survival, skills that would allow him to access hidden areas of the canyon system that were beyond the reach of standard search operations. But Vaughn's compulsion to document his crimes would prove to be his fatal flaw. Hidden in encrypted files on multiple cloud storage accounts, investigators found what appeared to be a trophy collection. Thousands of photographs showing couples at Grand Canyon, many taken without the subject's knowledge. The photographs were organized by date and location, with detailed notes about each couple's activities, relationship dynamics, and physical descriptions. Some files contained what appeared to be preliminary surveillance notes and attack planning documents. Most chilling were the photographs taken immediately before each disappearance. In image after image, Vaughn had captured couples in their final moments of normalcy, smiling, embracing, completely unaware they were being stalked by a predator. Agent Chen's team now had enough evidence to obtain search warrants for Vaughn's properties and digital devices. But they faced a critical challenge. Vaughn had been monitoring law enforcement communications and was aware the investigation was closing in. On October 28, 2024, surveillance teams lost contact with their target. Marcus Vaughn had vanished, just like his victims. But unlike his carefully planned disappearances, Vaughn's flight was hasty and desperate. He had made mistakes that would soon lead to his capture. Marcus Timothy Vaughn's disappearance triggered one of the largest manhunts in Arizona history. The FBI issued federal warrants on multiple charges, 16 counts of suspected murder, kidnapping, stalking, and weapons violations discovered during searches of his properties. The search of Vaughn's Flagstaff residence revealed the horrifying extent of his obsession. His basement had been converted into what investigators described as a surveillance command center, with multiple monitors, professional photography equipment, and detailed maps of Grand Canyon marked with victim locations. But the most disturbing discovery was a collection of personal items that appeared to be trophies from his victims. Brandon Ellis's missing phone was found in a locked box along with jewelry, cameras, and other belongings from couples who had disappeared over the past 15 years. Agent Chen's team also found Vaughn's detailed journals documenting his methodology and psychological motivations. The entries revealed a man consumed by hatred for couples displaying happiness, viewing himself as conducting some twisted form of justice against people he believed didn't deserve their good fortune. One journal entry from 2019, written days after Brandon and Natalie's disappearance, read, "The photography blogger and her software engineer thought they were so perfect, documenting their love for the world to see. They learned that some moments should remain private. The canyon keeps their secrets now." The manhunt intensified when investigators realized Vaughn had prepared multiple escape routes and safe houses throughout the Southwest. His photography business had provided cover for extensive travel, and he had established supply caches and alternate identities across several states. But Vaughn made a critical error that would lead to his capture. His compulsion to document everything extended to his own escape. He couldn't resist taking photographs during his flight, and these images contained metadata that FBI analysts could track. On November 12, 2024, facial recognition software identified Vaughn at a gas station in Moab, Utah, approximately 350 miles from his last known location. Security footage showed him purchasing supplies and fuel, apparently preparing for an extended period in hiding. The FBI coordinated with local law enforcement to establish a perimeter around the Moab area, focusing on remote locations where someone with Vaughn's outdoor skills might attempt to hide. The break came from an unexpected source. Vaughn had been monitoring law enforcement communications using sophisticated radio equipment, but he didn't realize that investigators were feeding false information through those channels as part of a coordinated deception operation. On November 15, 2024, believing that search teams were focusing on areas north of Moab, Vaughn moved to what he thought was a safer location in the La Salle Mountains. FBI surveillance teams had been tracking his movement through satellite imagery and were ready when he emerged from hiding. The arrest was swift and decisive. SWAT teams surrounded Vaughn's campsite at dawn, finding him attempting to destroy evidence by burning photographs and documents. Among the items recovered were detailed plans for future attacks, including surveillance notes on couples currently visiting national parks throughout the region. Investigators realized they had likely prevented additional murders by capturing Vaughn when they did. During his initial interrogation, Vaughn displayed the calculated demeanor that had allowed him to evade detection for over 15 years. He refused to provide information about his victims' remains or admit to any wrongdoing. But the evidence against him was overwhelming. Digital forensics analysis of his recovered devices revealed thousands of photographs documenting his stalking activities, detailed victim selection criteria, and what appeared to be a master database of potential targets. Perhaps most damning was his own documentation of the murders. Vaughn had recorded audio notes describing his attacks, apparently for his own psychological gratification. These recordings provided investigators with detailed accounts of how he had killed 16 couples over 15 years. The method was consistent and horrific. Vaughn would approach couples at isolated locations, claiming to be conducting a photography survey or offering to take their picture. Once he gained their trust and separated them from other visitors, he would incapacitate them using tasers or sedatives. The victims were then transported to hidden locations within the canyon system that Vaughn had discovered during years of exploration. These were natural caves and crevices that were inaccessible to search teams and where remains would never be recovered. Vaughn's recordings revealed his twisted psychology. He viewed himself as an artist creating perfect disappearances, and he took pride in law enforcement's inability to solve his cases. Agent Chen described Vaughn as one of the most methodical serial killers she had encountered. He combined the planning capabilities of an organized killer with intimate knowledge of the terrain and legitimate access to the hunting ground. It's remarkable that he was caught at all. The investigation also revealed that Vaughn had been escalating his activities. Recent entries in his journals suggested he was planning to expand his operations to other national parks and had begun developing new techniques for victim disposal. On November 20, 2024, Marcus Timothy Vaughn was formally charged with 16 counts of first-degree murder, along with federal charges related to crimes committed on federal property. Due to the overwhelming evidence and the heinous nature of his crimes, prosecutors announced they would seek the death penalty. But for the families of his victims, Vaughn's capture was only the beginning of a long journey toward justice and closure. Many questions remained unanswered, particularly regarding the location of their loved ones' remains. Rachel Monroe had succeeded in her mission to find her sister's killer, but the victory felt hollow without the possibility of bringing Natalie and Brandon home for proper burial. The trial of Marcus Timothy Vaughn began on March 15, 2025, exactly 1 year after Rachel Monroe's discovery of the mysterious figure in her sister's final photograph. The proceedings attracted international attention as one of the most significant serial killer cases in national park history. Prosecutor Jennifer Walsh built her case methodically, presenting the digital forensics evidence that had cracked the case and the extensive documentation of Vaughn's crimes found in his possession. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," Walsh said in her opening statement, "the defendant didn't just kill 16 people over 15 years, he hunted them, he stalked them, he documented their final moments for his own twisted gratification, and he did it all while hiding behind the facade of a professional photographer." The evidence presented was overwhelming. Rachel Monroe testified about her forensic analysis of the selfie that revealed Vaughn's presence. Agent Chen detailed the behavioral profile and pattern analysis that connected him to multiple disappearances. Dozens of family members provided victim impact statements describing the devastating effects of their loved ones' disappearances. But perhaps the most powerful testimony came from Detective James Harrison, who had never forgotten his unease with the original investigation into Brandon and Natalie's disappearance. "For 5 years, I wondered if I had missed something that could have prevented other deaths," Harrison told the jury. "The evidence was there in that photograph all along. We just didn't have the technology to see it clearly." Vaughn's defense team attempted to argue that the evidence was circumstantial and that his presence at the canyon could be explained by his legitimate photography business. They claimed the recovered trophies were items he had found during his canyon explorations, not taken from victims. But this strategy collapsed when prosecutors played Vaughn's own audio recordings describing his attacks in graphic detail. The recordings not only confirmed his guilt, but revealed the calculated nature of his crimes and his complete lack of remorse. The trial's most emotional moment came when Rachel Monroe was allowed to play an enhanced audio file recovered from Natalie's damaged phone. The file contained her sister's voice from their final day, describing the beauty of the canyon and her excitement about sharing the experience with Brandon. "That recording represents the last moments of happiness my sister experienced," Rachel testified. While she was talking about the wonder of nature and her love for Brandon, Marcus Vaughn was watching her through a camera lens, planning her murder. On April 8, 2025, after deliberating for less than 4 hours, the jury returned guilty verdicts on all charges. The speed of their decision reflected the overwhelming nature of the evidence and the horrific scope of Vaughn's crimes. During the penalty phase, families of all 16 victim couples were allowed to present impact statements. The cumulative effect was devastating, showing the ripple effects of Vaughn's actions across dozens of families and communities. David and Susan Brooks, Natalie's parents, spoke about the 5 years of uncertainty and false hope they had endured. "We never got to say goodbye to our daughter," Susan said through tears. "We never got to lay her to rest properly. Marcus Vaughn didn't just take Natalie's life, he stole our ability to grieve and find closure." On April 15, 2025, the jury recommended the death penalty for Marcus Timothy Vaughn. Judge Patricia Rodriguez formally sentenced him to death, calling his crimes among the most calculated and heinous acts of violence this court has ever encountered. But the legal victory provided only partial closure for the families. The location of the victims' remains was still unknown, and Vaughn refused to cooperate with authorities even after his conviction. However, Rachel Monroe's work was far from finished. Using the detailed maps and notes found in Vaughn's possession, she joined search teams attempting to locate the hidden areas where he had disposed of his victims' remains. The search effort, led by specialized cave rescue teams and forensic anthropologists, focused on the remote areas of the canyon that Vaughn had marked in his journals. These locations were often hundreds of feet below the rim, accessible only through technical climbing or rappelling. On June 3, 2025, searchers made their first significant discovery. In a concealed cave system approximately 3 miles from Hopi Point, they found the remains of 4 individuals, including personal items that identified them as victims from Vaughn's early crimes. The discovery provided some measure of closure for those families, but it also confirmed the grim reality that recovering all of Vaughn's victims would be a years-long process, if it was possible at all. Rachel Monroe continues to work with law enforcement agencies, applying her digital forensics expertise to cold cases across the country. She has become a leading advocate for families of missing persons and has established the Brooks Ellis Foundation, which provides advanced forensic analysis for cases that lack sufficient resources. "What happened to Natalie and Brandon was preventable," Rachel said in a recent interview. "If law enforcement agencies had better access to advanced digital forensics tools, patterns like Vaughn's could be identified much earlier. We can't bring back the people we've lost, but we can use technology to prevent future tragedies." The Canyon Watcher case has led to significant changes in how national parks handle missing persons investigations. New protocols require immediate digital forensics analysis of recovered devices, and park rangers now receive training in recognizing patterns of predatory behavior. Marcus Vaughn remains on death row at Arizona State Prison, where he continues to refuse cooperation with authorities seeking to locate additional victims' remains. His appeals process is expected to continue for years, but legal experts believe his conviction will stand given the overwhelming evidence against him. For Detective James Harrison, now retired, the case represents both vindication and regret. "We got the right outcome in the end, but it took too long and cost too many lives. The technology that cracked this case existed for years before we knew how to use it properly." The Grand Canyon continues to attract millions of visitors each year, most of whom experience the wonder and majesty that Brandon Ellis and Natalie Brooks had hoped to share with the world. But for those who know the full story, the canyon holds darker secrets in its depths. Rachel Monroe visits Hopi Point every year on the anniversary of her sister's disappearance. She brings enhanced printouts of that final selfie, the image that solved the case but couldn't save the lives already lost. Natalie wanted to show people the beauty of this place and inspire them to protect it, Rachel reflects. In a way, her final photograph did exactly that. It exposed a predator who had been destroying that beauty for 15 years. The Canyon Watcher may be behind bars, but his victims' stories live on as a reminder that even in America's most treasured natural spaces, vigilance and awareness remain essential for safety, and sometimes the most important evidence is hiding in plain sight, waiting for the right technology and the right person to reveal the truth that has been there all along. The investigation officially closed on August 14, 2025, but the search for additional victims continues. Rachel Monroe's work has inspired a new generation of digital forensic specialists who understand that in the modern age, every photograph, every device, and every digital footprint tells a story. Some stories reveal beauty and wonder. Others expose darkness that has been hiding in the shadows, waiting to be brought into the light. For Brandon Ellis and Natalie Brooks, their final selfie became the key to justice they never knew they were providing. Their love story, cut short by a predator's hatred, ultimately saved other couples from meeting the same fate. In the end, the Canyon Watcher's obsession with documenting his crimes became his downfall, proving that truth has a way of emerging even from the deepest shadows. The Grand Canyon missing couple case proves that some disappeared without a trace. Stories can find resolution through modern technology and relentless investigation. This true crime mystery demonstrates how missing persons cold cases can be solved when vanished. Without a trace, evidence is re-examined with advanced forensics. Rachel Monroe's dedication to her sister's disappearance mystery shows that unsolved missing person cases never truly close for families seeking answers. The Canyon Watcher case remains one of the most chilling, real unsolved mysteries in national park history, where vanished people became victims of a calculated predator. This suspenseful missing person story reminds us that mysterious disappearances can hide sinister truths, and that missing persons investigation techniques continue evolving to solve cold case files that seemed hopeless. Subscribe for more true crime disappearance stories and unsolved mysteries that will keep you on the edge of your seat.